to our ability. And, but it is really important. We do want to hear from you. I think we do have, between Corey and I, we can probably answer the bulk of your questions you would have. But I will echo, Councilmember Robertson's comment that we recognize that the closure is going to be painful. And while we've talked a lot about the pain of the closure, even when the closure is open, construction is still going to continue. Corey will talk about that a little bit more. We really are not expecting this project to be done until late in 2025. So, maybe this is good. We're going to make the most painful part here at the beginning, and it'll seem easier when we open it back up. So with that, I am going, and if you need a comment card because you have a question, raise your hand. Constance will bring them to you. When you have your question done, lift your card and somebody will come and grab it from you as well, and they'll sort those out, and we'll get to those as soon as we're done with the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey now, who is our project manager for this project.
All right, thank you, everyone. Before I launch into a bunch of the detailed stuff, I wanted to go over an agenda just to identify what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through the project background, the public engagement during design, learn a little bit about roundabouts, and especially the safety of roundabouts, and also work zone safety. We're going to give the project overview and some of the financial information, and then go over a little bit more detail on the project timeline and schedule. And then we'll get into some of the, I think, topics that people are most concerned about, which is travel impacts and trees, and then also how to stay updated. And then we'll get into our discussion topics or our question Q&A topics. So starting with the project background, I think most of you are aware 145th has been quite the troublesome corridor for residents of Shoreline, Seattle, and the wider region for many, many years. Currently, 145th has significant congestion, limited bus service with minimal bus stop accessories, significant barriers to pedestrian and bike mobility. We've highlighted the sign that says you just can't use it, and a high number of traffic accidents along its length. With the opening of the 148th Light Rail Station, this corridor needs to improve in order to support the increased housing development and greater demands for multimodal access, while also supporting the Shoreline City Council's commitment towards improving climate resiliency. This project started quite a long time ago. Back in 2015, scoping for this project began, and we held a series of public outreach events and traffic modeling of various options for the interchange. After a year of these interagency meetings, citizen advisory task meetings, open houses, and city council presentations, the council adopted the current scope for a dual roundabout interchange at I-5 and the widened 145th corridor to the west to allow for left turn movement capacity. And that occurred in March and April of 2016. And as I mentioned, part of that was selecting the roundabout. So the real question is why did we select roundabouts at the interchange? Roundabouts are designed to make intersections safer and more efficient for drivers and pedestrians and cyclists. Roundabouts do a great job of passively slowing drivers down prior to entering the intersection, while also providing a better entry angle with which to merge with oncoming traffic. Studies by the Federal Highway Administration have found that roundabouts can increase traffic capacity by 30 to 50% compared to a traditional signalized intersection. And driving through a typical intersection usually includes coming to a complete stop, idling, and then accelerating to proceed through the intersection. But with a roundabout, you can typically coast through and eliminate the need to stop and reaccelerate. And that really reduces the fuel consumption at those intersections. To further highlight the safety aspect, this is one of my favorite graphics about roundabouts. It highlights how many conflict points exist at both a roundabout and a regular signalized intersection. I don't know if you can see all the numbers on there, but in a roundabout, you're limited to 8 vehicle conflict points and 8 pedestrian conflict points. But with a regular intersection, exists 32 vehicle conflict points and 24 pedestrian points. So a Kansas State University study actually found that roundabouts reduced vehicle collisions by 39%, while further reducing serious and fatal collisions by 90% and 76% respectively. So once we decided on roundabouts, we actually had to deliver the project. And as we looked at the corridor in its entirety, it was daunting. So we opted to split up the corridor into 4.5 different projects. So to the east is the I-5 interchange project, which includes the roundabouts and work from 6th to just about First Avenue. And then phase 1 of the corridor project goes from First Avenue to Corliss, and that does some major intersection improvements at First Avenue while also creating a pedestrian crossing at Corliss. And then phases 2 and 3 will continue some of the expansion for left turn capacity and also widening of the sidewalk, predominantly in phase 2 through Meridian. And then phase 3 continues that work to create increased pedestrian mobility by improving the ADA ramps and doing some selective widening and barrier removal where appropriate, and bringing that multimodal capacity all the way out to Linden Avenue or the Interurban Trail. One other project that isn't included on this map because it's very wide ranging is the West Side Off Corridor Bike Network that goes from 160th and SR 99 and connects 145th and the 148th non-motorized bridge. So it's part of a much larger regional off corridor, but this is our 1/4 of it that we're completing. There's also an east side and a portion in Seattle to be completed. I did want to touch on the project financials real quick. This project is incredibly complicated and it exists on a very old facility that might be part of that crumbling infrastructure. It also serves as a primary east-west connection between Lake Washington and Puget Sound and intersects the major highways of Lake City Way, I-5, and SR 99. As such, the lift to get this project to where it is and where it will end has been a lot. The total expected cost for this project will be $74.9 million. And just to clarify, that is the phase 1 and interchange projects. There's additional costs for the phases 2 and 3. And understandably, Shoreline could not pay for this project on our own. So one of the benefits of a project of this magnitude and its proximity to I-5 is that it attracts a lot of attention from agencies who are interested in improving both the roadway and the multimodal capacity, as well as the utility infrastructure that exists under the roadway. We've partnered with multiple agencies and grant funding groups, including the FHWA, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant, we call it CMAQ, the State Fund Connecting Washington, Transportation Improvement Board, Sound Transit, Regional Mobility Grant, Seattle Public Utilities, and Seattle City Light. The timeline for phase 1 and the interchange, we're going to be constructing in 2024 and 2025. At the same time as we're constructing phases 1 and the interchange, we're going to start up or restart design on phases 2 and 3. So that'll start in 2024 and extend through 2025. Also, we're going to begin our right-of-way phase, which is acquiring parcels to complete our improvements. We're going to start that probably towards the end of 2024, but really reaching out to residents in 2025. And then phases 2 and 3 and the off-corridor bike network, we look to construct in 2026 and 2027. So that's a broad scope. I do want to focus in on the interchange in phase 1 and specifically the construction schedule. I hope that shows up. There's a lot of colors there. Okay, good. We executed the contract with Johansson Construction Company, who was our low bidder for the project. We executed in January 31st, 2024 of this year. In February and March, they've been preparing their work crews and ordering materials and generally getting ready for work. There's a lot of complicated material procurement that needs to happen on this project. So we provided them 60 days to start getting materials. And that leads us to April 1st, which was the start of the real on-site work. And that began with the full closure. Johansson and various utility companies will be working within the full closure to relocate the major utilities that are under 145th on the west side. And that'll be from April to October, which is that 7-month timeline. Additional time periods to note on this chart are tree removal will begin tomorrow and will extend through the rest of next week. And that tree removal will initially be on the north side, west of I-5, so within city of Shoreline limits. And then towards the end of April, they're going to be removing trees on the south side, also west of I-5. That's within city of Seattle limits. And then about mid-June, early to mid-June, they're going to be moving to the east side to remove trees over there. The work you'll start seeing within the work zones today is primarily utility relocation on top of the tree removal. And that will be followed up by the final roundabout configurations once we've untangled the spaghetti mess of utility lines. It will take until the summer of 2025 for these roundabouts to be fully operational. It's a complicated puzzle piece system to install. It's hard to just plop a circle on top of an existing road, so we kind of have to deviate around and do part and parcel for a while. But after the roundabouts are in place, we come over, we do a final paving, and then we're completed ideally end of September 2025. A few months prior to the roundabouts being implemented, the city of Shoreline is looking to conduct additional outreach with community members and the wider regional residents in order to make for an educational outreach for driving within roundabouts. Highway roundabouts can be slightly more complicated to navigate the first time through over our more neighborhood ones. So we want to make sure that people have had an opportunity to interface with these roundabouts, at least at a virtual level, and understand and what to expect day one to minimize that learning curve. So we'll jump into what I noted about the project closure of 145th. The closure is from I-5, west of I-5 to First Avenue. It's that portion going up the hill in between the two signals. Importantly to note, both signals are still operational. We've just closed down the corresponding leg between those two signals. We try to avoid having to implement this closure. Unfortunately, because of we have to install a roundabout flat in order for it to work well. And with that hillside, we end up having to cut into the hillside and make an excavation of about 10 feet. And then associated with that is we're going through a bunch of existing utilities there. So we have to drop those utilities and, like I said before, untangle them and make for a more resilient utility infrastructure underneath the roadway. But it is a lot of work and it's a lot of deep cuts, and we couldn't perform the work in a safe manner for drivers and work crews without closing down the road. Another benefit of closing down the roads is we can do it a lot faster. We can work on 2 utilities at once and just get the work done almost a year quicker. While 145th is closed, Johansson is maintaining the existing sidewalk on the north side of the highway, at least for the first couple months. So if you want to walk through the closure, you can. It'll be on the sidewalk on the north side, which is the better one anyways. And then that'll be the case for 2 months while they complete the detention vault work on 3rd Avenue. And then they'll put in a pedestrian path over the new detention vault, and pedestrians will be routed up the new 3rd Avenue onto 147th. Important to know, I call it 3rd Avenue because I think of it as a 3rd Avenue property. It won't actually be a street. It'll just be a maintenance road for the detention vault. We're just using it for pedestrians during construction. At a wider level, while we have that closure in place, we do need to have a detour around it. So the detour routing has been set up, will guide drivers to 155th to cross under I-5 and access both the northbound and southbound ramps from the east side. All the ramps are open, nothing's affecting them. You'll just have to get to them from the east side. There will also be no impact to the primary north and south routes of Meridian, 1st, 5th, and 15th, which will allow drivers to get to 155th as well as the interchanges at 175th and 130th. This is the detour that will be in place for the 7 months of the closure of 145th. Another thing we wanted to touch on tonight is the impact to trees that this project is generating. We understand the value of trees that trees have to the community and the environment. And we do not take the decision to remove these trees lightly. And we understand their role in the urban or in urban heat islands. In its current condition, 145th Street is heavily congested and accident prone and largely pedestrian and bicycle inaccessible. Our climate goals have informed our work on this project, with the primary goal being to reduce community-wide driving and idling traffic. Currently, transportation is, all right, Councilwoman already mentioned this, but transportation is Shoreline's largest greenhouse gas emission source, accounting for 55% of the total community-wide emissions in 2019. So this project is supporting that effort in reducing the greenhouse gases. When we widen a street, it is really impactful to the trees that surrounding the existing trees that surround the street. In this particular case, this is an actual diagram from just east of Sunnyside. It shows how we're adding that center left turn lane, which pushes our sidewalk out. And then additionally, we're also creating a widened sidewalk to support that pedestrian mobility. And when that happens, and especially in this case, we actually end up extending out over into dead air, essentially. So one of the ways that we're looking to protect trees where we can is to install fill walls, which will support the backage of sidewalk. And that prevents us from having to backslope into critical root zones, which would require the removal. You can see that bright, vibrant tree that we get to leave in place by installing walls. So we tried to do that where we could. Some of the trees in that footprint we couldn't remove, but we tried to limit it as much as we possibly could. Another thing I wanted to touch on is work zone safety. I did talk about how pedestrians will be using the existing sidewalk on the north side of 145th. This will be sandwiched between two work zones. So I really want to emphasize that for pedestrians, please stay on the guided path and stay out of the work zones. This project has very hazardous work within its limits, including tree felling, deep trench excavations, and large materials being lifted by cranes overhead. The danger can come from any direction, and the safest place is outside of the work zone. So following the signage, staying out of the work zone are incredibly important. I also do want to reiterate for drivers, especially on the detour, but also after the closure is removed, there's going to be a lot of different traffic control setups that occur as we work across the whole roadway prism. So things can change. As a reminder, drivers slow down when navigating the project limits and the detour route, drive the posted speeds. Please be kind to workers and fellow drivers. Pay attention every day. Small changes to signage and traffic flow are expected, especially as we get out of the 7-month full closure. And stay calm by giving yourself extra time or by taking an alternate route that is more consistent. So this is a large project, like I said, with a lot of changes. We do want to, we are committed to communicating in a lot of different formats consistently throughout the project. We're going to be using road signs, many briefings and meetings like this one, email and website updates, poster and flyer distribution. Some of you or may have already met Elizabeth as she walked the sites. And then we also want to use events like this to connect with community members. The information we share today, we understand not everybody could be here. So by sharing the information with the people who could attend, we're hoping that that message spreads and that people can gain information from the people here, know who to call, us or some of our contact cards, but just trying to spread this message and build those relationships. And then another way to stay updated is we have an email listserv. We have the Engage Shoreline website, and then we also have a 24-hour hotline. There's a QR code here which you can scan. I also have business cards right back there. Everybody can take one. It's got this information on there. Especially the Engage website will have the most up-to-date information about schedules and traffic control. and things to expect. It'll also have some really cool pictures that we post up there, especially once we start doing deep excavations. Or at least that's what I get excited about. Apologies if you don't. But that's where we'll keep a lot of our information and pictures that we want to share with the public. I really appreciate the time you've given me here today. I get excited about this project. I know it's going to have a really big impact on the region. I'm a Shoreline resident. I know once those roundabouts are in place, I might just sit there and spin in them for a while. But I am excited. I hope it comes through. And I think we can move on to the Q&A period.
So Tavi, do you,
I have a couple of questions I could start with while Constance
you have to have your mic.
go. My first time with the mic. Okay. I have one question about noise restrictions. What are the noise restrictions for work after 10 p.m.? This person has had some impacts. One evening from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Construction crews at 5th and 145th were using a concrete saw, and then Monday after midnight, these people were woken up with what sounded like an industrial vacuum.
Okay, I'll take the notes. If you have the answers, do you know the noise hours?
Sure.
Good.
Well, I actually don't remember the specific hours. I do know our contractor is limited to not working nights unless they apply for the nighttime noise variance, which they haven't done so yet. One of the utility companies that's working out there right now, this is about to get really complicated, apologies. PSE is self-performing some gas line relocation, so they'll be out on 145th this month. They do have a noise variance to work all through the night. I don't have the noise variance in front of me, so I'm not positive on what tasks can be performed at night, but it does allow for some louder activities to occur at night. So that's held by PSE. I think if I remember, the saw cutting project or the saw cutting issue at 5th was related to the sound transit project. So this is where it gets really complicated. There's a few projects happening in that area. What's happening at 5th is related to sound transit. What's happening west of the freeway currently is related to the 145th project. And I know that doesn't help. You can always reach out to me and I will point you in the right direction. But that was saw cutting of the sidewalk, and I don't know what their noise variance is.
And that is also something that you can go ahead and use that 24-hour hotline to call in, and then we can do the investigation and figure out mitigations and or get a response back to you.
Noise. It would seem to me it would be helpful to, my name is Liz Kelly, I'm the city engineer, but for you to be able to get information about noise variances on the website. And so how about if we make that available so that folks know, okay, this contractor is actually not supposed to be making noise above a certain level beyond some time, so that they would call if they are hearing noise. Now, as Corey was saying, I mean, we're all government and you look to us because we're trying to make improvements. But there's many different companies out there doing work. And so when he uses the word investigation, that truly might be what would need to happen, because we don't know for sure which contractor or which entity might be doing the work at any given time. But we certainly want to help you understand and minimize impacts when we can.
And we'll do the legwork to figure out which contractor it is, rather than you having to sort through and figure out who's responsible for what.
So is there a way?
Patty, we're actually going to do it this way first.
Well,
I know.
All right.
And what might be an answer? So for the sound transit work, Juniper NAMI posted in conjunction with Sound Transit on a regular basis when there was going to be nighttime work and noise that fit within the allowances of what was going to happen during sound transit construction. It would be nice to have a similar product produced for this. It's going to affect a lot of the same people who have been listening to the Sound Transit construction for the last couple of years and will continue to do so for several months yet. But at least there were notices going out on a regular basis, so you knew which nights to make sure all the windows, all the doors were closed, that you had your earplugs handy and whatever. So that might be helpful.
All right, Tavia, do you have another question?
See. Here's an easy one. Is there anyone who monitors the hotline after the regular workday? And the answer is yes, and this is an online question, so they probably can't see you, Elizabeth. Maybe you
Oh,
can.
yeah, Elizabeth, come on up here.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Guevara, and I'm one of the communications leads, and I manage the 24-hour hotline call. It does rotate with other folks. There's other folks on our team, but I am probably the person picking up the phone most of the time. So happy to help.
Okay, I have two questions about 145th east of I-5. When will that section be improved? And will there be center turn lanes on 145th east of I-5?
I'll take that one, Corey. How's that sound? So the scope of the work that the city's doing is from 6th to the west over a period of time. So heading from 6th to the east, make sure I get my directions right. There is work that will be occurring that is part of the Sound Transit Bus Rapid Transit Project, also called STRIDE. Those improvements are more focused on bus speed and reliability. So it does not necessarily include the same like center turn lanes, intersection improvements. It is more focused about bus access. So right now there is not projects for some of the same intersection improvements, center turn lane improvements moving east from 6th Avenue.
Okay. I have a couple of tree questions. Has the tree removal timing been planned in consultation with the WDFW? The second set of removals occurs during fledgling season for many species of birds, especially songbirds. And another question that ties into that, what measures are being taken to protect wildlife, specifically birds who nest in these trees at this time of year?
All of it. I'll add in around the edges, but I think
Okay.
you know more than I do.
So our contract does not include wildlife protection as it relates to the animals themselves. There is the protection of the workers and notification as far as part of their safety plan for wildlife interaction. And they do have a line to call for injured animals, but there isn't any specific wildlife protection in the tree removal plan. There was a couple other parts of that question. I think one was related to the east side removal being in June.
Yes, occurring during fledgling season for many species of birds, especially songbirds.
Yeah, that is, it's a bit ignorant of me to not have that in the contract. I think that's something we can talk about with our contractor and try to identify ways we can work with them to allow the work, monitor for nesting that's occurring in those trees. I can't commit to anything today because I haven't talked to them about it, but that is something that we can start that conversation over. Is there a third part?
Did I?
Since tree cutting is starting tomorrow.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Since tree cutting is commencing tomorrow, how quickly can we, can you act on that?
This would be for the east side trees.
For the east side trees, so
Yes.
nothing for the west side trees?
Correct, yes.
At all? So we're just gonna cut down trees with animals in them and let them die?
I don't know that tree removal is a death sentence to the animals.
What do you think is gonna happen to nesting animals in those trees? Do you not think they're gonna die?
I am not an expert on nesting
Well,
animals.
I can tell you they're gonna die. I mean, the minute the tree falls to the ground with the nest in it, it's done. It's not complicated. So what you're saying is nothing can be done for the phase on the west side at all, or even on the south side of the west side, north
Correct.
and south. So basically all of April would be lost for animal protection. So we're
Correct.
talking June. We're talking June is when you would be able to have those tree protections in place or for the animals.
Most likely.
Okay.
All right. I have a couple of questions about pedestrian safety on the roundabouts. Will there be pedestrian activated lights at each of the pedestrian crossings? And what kinds of traffic calming safety interventions will be applied to the crossings, like raised crosswalks, speed bumps, flashing signals? So those kinds of safety things.
Yeah, so to start, all of the crossings at the roundabouts will have, we call them RRFBs. They're the flashing beacons, and they are activated by pedestrians. So every crossing has that. The mitigation, the slowdown measures we're using is actually chicaning with the roundabouts. So we use tight radii in the roundabouts to slow people down. That's how we get them to slow down to enter the roundabout, and then also slow down when they're crossing or exiting the roundabout where it would go over the pedestrian crossings. We don't want to use speed tables or speed bumps because this is a highway, and navigating turns while you're doing a vertical movement can be kind of dangerous, honestly. So we're using more delineation and chicaning of vehicles to slow them down. And then also along with the flashing beacons, it's a very proven effective method to for pedestrian safety at those crossings. And then
I'd say I'd also mention on those like elevated sidewalks and speed tables, these will have buses in both of them as well. So that also played a big consideration into how we designed this to make sure it would still accommodate buses, both for those speed tables that as they go up and down, and for the geometry to slow down cars, but still enable buses to get through the roundabouts.
Okay. I have, oh, sorry, you good? Okay, I have a roundabout education question. And I guess basically just a statement more. Please work to educate on how to use roundabouts through currents, perhaps multiple times. Use big signage that's easy to understand. They've experienced multiple cars back to back running too quickly and too close to get by, and they couldn't get in. So just a reminder to do a lot of education.
We really appreciate that, those suggestions. That is definitely one of our critical items, particularly as we get closer to opening these, is to make sure we do a lot of outreach and explain how to use roundabouts, so that people are informed.
And then I have questions on speed. Will the speed limit on 145th stay the same? And another of the same type of question, will there be permanent speed reductions on 145th, especially approaching the roundabouts?
You know the answer to that one?
I do, well, I know the complications.
Right.
One of the unique things about this road is that it is owned by, half of it's owned by Seattle. The other half is owned by King County, that is then given to WashDOT to manage. It is very complicated to work with those two agencies. They have different values on speed. I think if you talk to Seattle, they would probably reduce it down to 25 miles per hour. But WashDOT recognizes this as a highway. So those conversations have occurred in the past. They haven't continued. But I know speed is part of the discussion for the long-term viability of this highway.
And then what about this does the speed limit get posted differently as you enter into the roundabout, or we're just using geometry?
There's advisory speeds for the roundabout. So the actual speed limit doesn't change, but there'll be posted advisory to slow you down. And then also the geometry will slow you down.
A couple more questions on east of the intersection. When is that BRT improvement happening? And do you know if there are any bike and pedestrian improvements planned for that section?
Yeah, so my recollection is that project is scheduled to begin in 2025. But again, it's a very long project. That project extends from Woodinville all the way to the 148th Light Rail Station. So I don't know what their construction plan or construction sequencing is relative to when the work will be in the 145th area, relative to their schedule. Relative to pedestrian and bicycle improvements, that was the other half of the question, right?
Yes.
They are making some pedestrian improvements, but not along the whole corridor. Most of their improvements are at what they're calling their stations, one of which is at 15th, and I think the other one is at 25th. I could be wrong on that. They have two main stations along 145th. Those will have pedestrian improvements. And then also between 6th and about 10th, they are adding a bus access lane. And so they will be doing pedestrian improvements along there as well, but it will not be corridor wide. And that will be on both the Seattle side. So it's different on the Seattle side and on the Shoreline side. They're roughly comparable, but not exactly the same.
Can you talk about the 850 plus replacement trees? What size, type, timeline those will be?
I'll leave that one for you, Corey.
I don't remember which trees are going in. Typically, trees are planted towards the end of the project once the heavy grading has occurred. So I would expect those trees to be installed towards the end, probably in that September, October range. And then they would be managed for a year afterwards to ensure their health. I'm not sure who asked that question, but I can certainly provide a breakdown of the species of trees and plants that are going in on the project.
Okay. Let's see. A couple more trees questions here. There's some of these are long, so I'm trying to pull them out piece by piece. Why are sidewalks and bike lanes not being routed around trees? Trees provide pedestrian safety from the road.
Do you want to answer that on the project level?
Try both, because I think I think the project provides a systemic answer.
Sure. So, and I will talk specifically about this project. When we reroute a sidewalk around a tree, I showed that one graphic that explains how we're expanding out over a grade. So if we were to reroute the sidewalk around a tree, we're trying to say we'd actually create a much larger footprint of both fill walls and other structural elements, and then probably impacting trees that are behind it or even houses that are behind it. So by pushing it up against the road, we lessen our footprint and our tree impact significantly.
And I'll add to that, if it was as simple as just routing the sidewalk around a tree, we would absolutely do that. But as Corey said, we've got differences in topography. And so when we need to raise the sidewalk up to match the grade of the roadway, it makes it much more difficult to just go around a tree, because now the tree would also be in fill. We do look for those opportunities kind of on the edges of those prisms to see if we can alter the route of the sidewalk around a tree. It's just a lot harder when we look at it in 3 dimensions versus 2 dimensions.
Okay, I have a couple here. Sidewalks on the north side of 145th, west of the actual project. The city needs to clean and clear duff and litter off asphalt and trim brush, shrubs, and trees to make this walkable, or to make this walkway usable. It's more a comment than a question, but if you know of any plans to do that.
To do more of the sidewalk maintenance in the existing sidewalk?
So I can clarify on that.
Just a sec.
That was my comment, Trish. Monday before the closures or Sunday or whatever day, I purposely drove that route. And once you get west of the project where the signage says, no more work you're at the end of the work zone and you're heading towards the Westminster Triangle area, the sidewalk, asphalt sidewalk on the Shoreline side is almost non-existent because it is not maintained. It's a fairly wide asphalt sidewalk, but it has duff, it has litter, it has tree intrusion for branches that are hanging too low. It has weeds. It's an absolute mess. So if you're going to create this walkable, more user-friendly, multi-billion-dollar project, it would be nice to get out just past the project edge with some shovels and clean that up and make that usable so it actually ties in.
That's a really good observation. And like all these questions, there's not an easy answer. But we can do some things on this. Typically, maintenance of the sidewalk, including vegetation management, is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. But we recognize some property owners do that more and some property owners do that less.
Almost everybody there has solid wood fences. It's not accessible to the property to get out there and maintain that section of the sidewalk.
Right. And then the other complicating factor, and this is not intended to be an excuse because I think we can try and do some work on this, is it is maintained, that is WashDOT's responsibility currently. And so it's not our jurisdiction to go out and do the vegetation management, the cleaning of the sidewalks. That said, we can certainly talk to WashDOT and talk about that being a problem. And then when we finish all this wonderful work, we have committed that on the Shoreline side, Shoreline will be maintaining those sidewalks. So in the future, we'll probably have a better situation than what we currently have.
Right.
We will have a better situation than
Thank you.
not probably.
Okay, there are several questions and comments in this one. First question, and we'll talk about wildlife again in a minute. What calculations were done to study the impacts of greater reliance on air conditioning after these large cooling shade trees are removed?
There was no analysis regarding that done. That would not be a typical analysis for a project like this.
How many residences do you think would be affected? I think maybe that's by the removal of those trees in terms of shade. Since they're,
Well, it's an interesting, again, not an easy answer or a cookie cutter answer. A lot of the trees that are being removed are in areas where there may not be houses because we're building a stormwater facility. It may be on properties where we have purchased the homes because of the widening. So that again, the homes may have been removed by now, but I don't think we've done anything to quantify the number of homes affected by the loss, specifically adjacent to those trees. Is that correct, Corey?
Yeah, that's correct.
and I think this is connected. Given that mature trees retain large amounts of stormwater, has the impact of these large scale trees removals been studied on the storm and polluted water? 74 remaining members of the Southern Resident Orcas will be affected. I assume that's what that means. What will be done to reduce flooding and polluted water runoff?
Well, so one advantage of a project like this is currently that roadway does not have any stormwater control, water quality, or flow control on it. With this project, we will be actually collecting it. The flow will be going into a detention facility. It will be getting treated. It will be getting stored and released at a slower rate. So this project will probably improve water quality and quantity from what exists out there today. Is that a fair statement, Gordon?
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, when we model a project like this, we don't do it based on existing and try to match that. Even with a widened sidewalk, we go back to what's called a forested condition. So we're using metrics that are better than the current existing conditions.
It creates this interesting dynamic in that in order to build that stormwater facility, in order to have a space that's large enough to build that stormwater facility, we actually end up needing to remove trees. That is part of the reason for the tree removal. But we will be able to capture the stormwater, provide better water quality, and detention on the stormwater.
And this is a follow-up to the other question about wildlife. This person has already talked to Tavia about a wildlife first responder to help with pickups to pause. So something to add in, especially when you think about the June removals.
We certainly can look into that.
I have a couple more for online. Why is the northbound ramp from Fifth Avenue not tied into the roundabout system? A new intersection with traffic lights does not seem efficient given the rest of the project.
Do you know the answer to that? Gordon?
Can you read it one more time? I think I know what the question's asking.
So the northbound ramp from Fifth Avenue, the one by the
The light rail.
station, yeah. Why is it not tied into the roundabout system?
Yeah.
That new intersection with traffic lights doesn't seem efficient given the rest of the project.
Yeah, I think that's a complication with the Sound Transit property through there. The railway has it's hard to go parallel to a railway in close proximity, which is what that would require. Also, we would have to deviate Fifth away, create more like a spoke, five-way spoke of the roundabout, which just creates a lot more, be a greater realignment of Fifth Avenue versus what is current, which is to just bring people up and then take a left at the on-ramp.
It's also a matter of timing relative to when these two projects were designed. Is by the time we identified roundabouts for this project, Sound Transit already had their project plans approved and moving towards construction. So that signal had already been identified and approved. But we did have to model it to make sure that that signal would not create problems in backing traffic up into the roundabout. And so it does still function.
And a clarifying question on one of your previous answers. What is a speed table?
You can go ahead. It's like this little tag team.
Yeah, so a speed table is it's kind of like a speed bump. I think there's one over at the Westminster.
There's one over at Westminster.
Yeah, so it's a larger raised, kind of like a speed bump, but it's got a flat top. So if you're experiencing it as a driver, you would go up and then you'd be level for 10 to 12 feet and then you drop down. And typically on top of those speed tables, you would have a pedestrian crossing.
So it elevates the pedestrian, makes it more visible and slows down vehicles as they're coming into that pedestrian crossing.
Let's see. I have a signal timing question. Southbound Fifth Avenue Northeast to I-5 during construction is often backed up due to conflicting timing with I-5 off ramps onto 145th. Can the signal timings be revised just for the construction duration?
Signal timings can absolutely be revised. We're working with SDOT signals. We're also working with our own signals within Shoreline to help mitigate along the detour route and at the interchange itself. Can you repeat which signal was identified in that one?
It is southbound Fifth to I-5 South?
So that's going in front of the light rail, taking a right onto 145th and then a left onto I-5 South now.
Oh, so they're talking about the
Right.
series of signals, I
I
think.
think so. I think
Okay.
we have someone here, so maybe they can clarify the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we won't have to worry about signal timing when we remove
That's
the
right.
signals and we put in roundabouts.
Can't time a roundabout.
No, I appreciate the roundabout project. My question is, if you're coming down, there are two signals. The first one, 145th and 5th, the second one coming off I-5. And so whenever cars are trying to take that left down to I-5 South towards Seattle, we have that other signal. I'm not sure whether timing has been changed once construction started or whether it's continued, business as usual. But then we have that left turn from traffic coming off I-5 onto 145th. That signal is running quite long, leading it back up on the bridge over I-5.
Yeah, and we have started some of that signal timing tinkering. We're working with WashDOT on that, but yeah, that is a continued effort to understand how people are using the interchange, especially now that we've made the closure. So we're trying to bring that in. Interstates tend to get preference in these types of situations because backing up onto I-5 is a lot worse than backing on 145th. However, I agree there is capacity to kind of tighten that up. And especially when, now that we've removed an entire leg of that intersection, we should be able to, like I said, tighten that in and clear more cars on 145th without sacrificing performance on the off-ramp.
Okay, and I have another tree question. Tree loss in this project follows the exact pattern of slow and steady increase of concrete and loss of habitat seen in LA, Detroit, and other cities. Why was tree protection not priority number one for this project?
Well, the needs that were identified for this project were around safety and traffic congestion. And so without those needs around those objectives, we wouldn't have these tree impacts. So in order to make it a safer, better operating roadway and a better pedestrian facilities, trees will be impacted. I don't see a way where we would have been able to meet the project objectives and eliminated tree removals.
We've got about 5 more that I have.
This was just reference to that specific question. I didn't ask that question, but one of the statements that was made right off the bat was about reducing carbon emissions and cutting down traffic, which we know trees reduce carbon. It's a carbon uptake situation. So taking the trees out, I mean, one of your priorities was reducing carbon emissions because that's been mentioned several times here about the 2019 status of carbon emissions in this area, what, 55% of the region? So that was one of your goals, was to reduce carbon emissions, not just safety and traffic control. So taking out 317 trees definitely increases the carbon in the air because these trees are going to be gone.
Yeah, I think our objective around the carbon emissions is about mode shift and trying to reduce reliance on vehicles and creating a more bike pedestrian friendly environment for people to be able to move about without reliance on cars. And then the other element is with roundabouts, you see a reduced emissions because you don't have vehicles idling at signalized intersections. And I get the kind of conflict between if we're trying to reduce carbon emissions, but we're removing trees, it seems kind of hypocritical. But it is a balance between how do we create an environment for mode shift and encouraging non-motorized uses in order to actually eliminate some of those emissions, which is causing them, consequently we're losing trees which do the uptake I understand that conflict between those two issues.
Okay. I have a surface water question. Will this project also address the issue of water drainage off the hillside of Lakeside High School and water ponding on and across the I-5 southbound on-ramp?
It should. But we haven't done our job.
Right, yeah, we would need to revisit that if it continued. There are improved and armored swales that are gonna be ditches, large ditches that are going to be installed bordering Lakeside. There's also going to be a wall, a newly installed wall on the north side of Lakeside, which will have a wall drain that will convey to the swale. So ideally, we have captured everything. Certainly part of our commitment to this project is if we identify that further ponding is occurring, we're gonna go out and make a field change and address it.
Yeah, I know in the current condition, it's kind of interesting because you do have the water running down the gutter lines there down that hillside. And there really is very limited. There's no really closed conveyance or pipes in there. So it is kind of a free for all for the stormwater as it runs around until it finds a catch basin or finds a ditch. Very, very limited.
Will the off-quarter bicycle network be online in coordination with the completion of the 145th Street project phases and the 148th light rail station?
The current schedule for the West Side Off-Corridor Bike Network is to be constructed in 2026, which would be after phases 1 in the interchange and after the 148th light rail station.
You know, in an ideal world, we would have all these projects done before light rail opens. Unfortunately, we don't live in that perfect world. And so these things do have to get phased for a variety of reasons. And so, yeah, that off-corridor bike network will not be available at the time that the light rail goes into operation.
I have a couple of tree questions from one person. I think we've addressed a couple of them already. I'm gonna read them. Trees sanitize air through I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering this, phytoncides, and improve blood pressure, mental health, and nervous system regulation. How will this project offset public health deterioration due to tree loss? And what is the project doing to replace wildlife habitat loss? There was also the question again of allowing for volunteers to care for wildlife. But those first two, I don't believe we've addressed yet.
So I think to the extent practical on this project, we are replanting trees and revegetating the area so that we can restore some of the benefits that we see from trees. It certainly won't replace it at 100%, but we are doing it to the extent practicable on this project. Did I hit? Was there any other portion of that?
Yeah, and I think the other part of the question was the wildlife habitat.
Help it habitat loss, yeah.
Yeah, one of the efforts of this project is to fill in the space under the light rail guideway. So we're using a variety of species of trees and large bushes, which will also increase the habitat over there. There's a lot of impervious asphalt surface and hard pan dirt over there right now, or even before the light rail went in. So we're looking to restore a lot of that to maybe even before I-5 came through.
Are roundabouts typically used on major arterials and or highways? Bend, Oregon has a large number of roundabouts and they have sculptures in the middle to help people see them at night.
So roundabouts are, WashDOT is making a big push. They were actually one of the reasons we analyzed roundabouts on this project. They're seeing a lot of benefit nationwide and they want to bring roundabouts onto their highway system here in Washington. I know Highway 9 has a lot of roundabouts. I think it's going to be up to 19 in the next few years. And then also US 2 has a couple of them, so that they're starting to find their way into the highway system. There are only a few that I know of that are adjacent to I-5, part of that interchange. They're typically up north. This one is a little bit of a pioneer because it's occurring in more of an urban setting. So it's exciting. It's exciting to put it. Right. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, there's quite a few around if you get outside the metropolitan I-5 corridor.
Yeah, we won't be seeing any within Seattle city limits anytime soon.
They actually have one in design on 130th in Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I guess it is inside Seattle.
It
I was
is in
thinking like
Seattle.
downtown.
Yeah, no.
I have one,
If you want to experience this double roundabout situation, if you want to experience the double roundabout, over on 132nd that goes through Kirkland, they have done that under 405. I thought it was very cumbersome. One's on one side and one's on the other, like you're proposing here. And at the busy time of traffic, it was pretty, I don't know, it was pretty slow. That's all I have to say. But if you want to experience that double roundabout, you can go off Simon's Road to 132nd, go left and take it straight up and you'll encounter it. And it'll give you an idea of what's coming.
and I have one last question from online. And if people online have not heard their question yet, please go ahead and let me know in chat. Is the city making plans to supplement sidewalk improvement between the bus rapid transit project updates?
At this time, we are not. We are really focused on this west side. And we do not have a future phase at this point that fills in those gaps on the east side.
Just following up on that is, so it's really not walkable on 145th on east side of the freeway to go to the light rail station. Then you would just go on 155th and down Fifth Ave?
You could, or go off of 145th over to 147th if you're on the east side and come down 147th. And are you talking about like 145th on the Seattle side or on the Shoreline side or both?
It's both sides, but I would like to know if there is like a list of improvements that enhancements coming in the future that have been requested.
Yeah, when we did our corridor study of 145th, it did include both the east side and the west side. So we definitely identified that there's a need for improved pedestrian mobility. We recognize the challenges with that, but our priority and focus has been on this west side. We were, I think initially Sound Transit's plans were including rebuilding that whole corridor, including all the sidewalk improvements. So I think there was some hope that that would get that in, but they then reduced their scope based upon funding and costs. And so that other piece has not been picked up yet. There's a lot to do and limited resources that will continue to be our challenge.
Any more online?
I have not seen any more on.
Okay, for those of you who haven't got to ask.
Thanks. Just sticking with the roundabouts again. Can you talk about, so it will be closed for the first 2 months, this project, once the light rail station opens. So it's really that September and October, at least that's what the timeline is. But you mentioned in the roundabouts won't be completed till sometime in 2025. So can you talk a little bit more about when 145th fully reopens, what state the roundabouts will be in, and what sort of mitigations for some things we've touched on, speed reduction, education, et cetera. But thank you.
Just to clarify your question, you're asking once the closure is fully opened, what state the corridor will be in?
Specifically about the roundabouts, because will they be up and running then? I thought a comment earlier was that they wouldn't be finished so much later. So when do they go live, I guess? Because that seems to be the biggest piece here of change.
Sure. So the when the the reason we have, sorry, I'm trying to do two things. I should just do one time.
The other part of the question has to do with the bit of uncertainty about exactly when the station opens.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could address.
We'll know tomorrow. Sound Transit's supposed to announce their opening date. They're supposed to announce their opening date tomorrow. But we do anticipate that there will be a period of time where our closures is still in place after they open. But relative to when we do open, what does the rest of it look like? I'll let Corey answer that.
Yeah, so the primary reason we're doing the full closure is to be able to cut down the grade on the west side and also relocate those utilities. Part of that restoration is the roundabouts. It's a utility project with a roundabout on top. So when we open the roadway, it's going to be roughly in its current configuration with some additional traffic control. It'll still be signalized intersections on both sides of I-5. And then there'll be some additional lane shifting as Johansson does their work. The roundabouts themselves will start being constructed after the full closure occurs. And the reason for that is, I don't know if did you drive 185th while they were building that roundabout at all? Yeah, so that same idea, just on a bigger scale down here, is we're having to, shift lanes to the north in order to construct the south, and shift lanes to the south to construct the north. So the roundabout won't open, at least in a drivable state, until the summer of 2025. And then the project will actually be completed pretty soon after. But we won't get to experience the glory of roundabouts until that time. That's correct, yeah.
It's a real cookie cutter, and it is the contractor's responsibility to maintain traffic in both directions while we do those shifting of lanes and adjustments to be able to get that into place.
I'll add one other thing. When we were originally scoping out this project and doing the schedule, the standard practice for a roundabout at an interchange is to do concrete panels, which is incredibly laborious, and you have to alternate them, so you kind of end up walking your way around, and it takes a very long time. We worked with WashDOT to increase our pavement section and create a stronger pavement prism that will allow us to pave these roundabouts all at one time. So we'll be able to implement them a lot faster.
I might have missed it. I'm wondering about, so when the light rail station opens, the 145th is going to be, closed, or I don't know, it's going to be a significant amount of time when there's construction continuing. I'm wondering about the buses, though, that go to the 148th station. Can you talk about, like, the Metro line or Sound Transit's lines, like, or is there actually, maybe not talk about it, but just, is there some way that we can get more information to know, like, when the buses are going to be running and, what the plan is there? Because, just so that people know how to get to the station.
Yeah,
And that seems to be I'm just really confused about how I'm actually going to get to these stations at this point now.
absolutely. So we've been coordinating with KC Metro, and in conjunction with the opening of the light rail station, they are going to be making a revenue service change on some of their lines. I think they're adding 2 lines that are intended to utilize 145th. We've been working with them, and they have a planned reroute that'll go kind of follow the detour path. I think it jogs around a little differently. So they're preparing those materials. That's going to be part of their outreach. I think somebody said, oh, Elizabeth.
Hi. If you haven't signed up for listserv updates, you can. We'll be sharing some of their messaging for that reroute that KC Metro is planning to do soon. So if you haven't signed up and or want to be connected, I'm happy to do that for you.
But they were a key partner of ours in discussing and making the decision to do this closure. So we've done this with them, arm in arm. Not saying it makes it easy for riders, users. It's certainly not ideal to still have 145th and these roundabouts in construction when the light rail opens. For lack of a better phrase, it's just it's just the way the timing and the funding worked out in order to be able to get this project done.
Can I hand you the mic, please?
Do you have that slide where the two roundabouts are at completion
I will have to remember.
in relation to I-5? Was there a slide like that? I thought I saw something that
Well-
actually showed how it's gonna work. I guess it's that one there at the
Yeah,
end.
it's really small. I
Yeah.
don't have a
So-
blown-up version.
My question is, it kind of goes back to back with the issue over in Kirkland. We're talking about an interstate that's like 4 lanes of, heavy traffic at times coming off. And right now, there is a stoplight there, but you have a free right turn when you can take one. Having a roundabout off of I-5 where you're off-ramping and on-ramping on both sides of the freeway like that, we're not talking about a highway like Highway 9 or 2. We're talking about an interstate. And that's a lot of traffic coming off. How's that not gonna back up onto the freeway?
So, okay, I'm gonna meter myself because I love roundabouts a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
And she can't tell his
Yeah.
enthusiasm.
So there's a lot of small things that we can do with this roundabout. We can, and we are maintaining a right turn slip lane is what we call it. So it's a lane that is separated from the roundabout. So when you're talking about like coming off of southbound and taking that right onto westbound 145th,
Mhm.
you don't enter the roundabout. You just stay to the right and you slip right through.
What about pedestrian traffic?
That crosses there.
Right,
And-
so you could potentially have an accident if people are just using the slip lane and a pedestrian's crossing, right?
So they'll have the flashing beacon. And part of the chicane is that it slows people down to that 15 mile per hour,
Right.
which is a very identifiable speed to recognize when pedestrians are crossing and you've got these bright flashing lights.
Right, but it's just the sheer volume of traffic I'm thinking about that's gonna go through this area. And you have pedestrians crossing and even with the slip lane, I mean, I can't see this not backing up on I-5, to be honest.
So we've done the modeling and the modeling actually runs about 30% better than our current signals, even with the future build out of all the other residents in the area. So the roundabout is, at least according to the modeling, there might be specific catch points that happen, but it is better than signalized intersections. The major benefit of roundabouts is that you don't have to stop.
Right.
So you don't build that queue length.
Has this been done on this scale with interstate like I-5? I mean, have roundabouts been implemented in this capacity like in other cities? It worked?
Yes, nationwide. There's a lot of success stories about roundabouts. I have a link to one in Nebraska, and they've got even wider and more used interstates than we do here in Washington. There's a reason WashDOT is pushing roundabouts into these interchanges. We are at the point now where if we're making an interchange improvement in the state of Washington, we have to prove that roundabouts would be worse because they are almost categorically better.
Okay.
And it's also just worth noting, as Corey mentioned earlier, Washington DOT is very protective of backups onto the I-5 main line. So if they had concerns that this would be worse and would create larger and more backups onto the main line, they would not have been supportive of it. So the modeling just reinforces that this will work. Right, I get that, but like I said, WashDOT has fully reviewed this, encouraged this, reviewed this, is comfortable, confident with it. And like I said, they're very protective and their biggest concern is backups onto the main line.
I have a question around the west side roundabout and traffic flow. Just want to again reiterate that I fully support roundabouts. They work around the world, in Australia, where I'm originally from, in the UK. So I've seen these in reality in many places and they work well. My one concern with this specific design, this is not about roundabouts in general, traffic on 145th going eastbound, there is no traffic. All the traffic entering the roundabout is blocking them, and there's no traffic that would block the other flows because you have to give way to traffic from your left. And so I'm wondering what the impact is for that eastbound traffic on 145th through that roundabout, given that there's traffic coming in from the north and that's stopped by traffic going east. Traffic going east isn't stopped by anyone unless you're doing a U-turn around that roundabout. So I'm just wondering, yeah, what it looks like for traffic flow going eastbound.
One of the interesting things about going next to I-5 is that it's your peak hours alternate both in east-west directions and north-south directions. So it's pretty rare to have heavy flow from 3 out of the 4 directions. I think you were asking the question on southbound, would there be a gap for eastbound 145th?
My question was for westbound.
I thought I heard
Because they'll
eastbound.
always be they'll be through traffic if there are, for everyone going eastbound, they'll need to give way to traffic going south onto I-5.
Because if they're
Traffic
driving
coming-
west, if they're driving
If they're driving west, they don't give way to anyone. They don't need to give way to anyone unless
they
they're doing a
enter,
U-turn.
they enter the roundabout first, therefore
Yes.
they would get onto the southbound on-ramp first. And you're wondering if
Correct.
there's enough gap then for people that are heading eastbound to be able to get into the roundabout.
Yes,
Do you have
thank
the
you.
answer to that, Corey? Other than yes, that would be my answer.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah, it is, sorry, excuse me. When you look at a signalized intersection, you tend to see big blocks of cars move through, and that can kind of influence how we view how a corridor functions. But one of the nice things about the roundabouts is that they maintained better spacing, especially coming out of that east side roundabout. You know, the westbound traffic that you're referencing is also partially metered by its entry into the east roundabout. And so if you've got westbound traffic that's metered in the east side, it would also be metered on the west side just by its natural function and its correlation to the east side roundabout. So there are gaps. It won't be a constant block of cars coming from the west side because won't be a constant block of cars coming westbound because it's metered by the east side, if that makes sense.
And if you do want to see a little bit more, on our website for this project, we did a while back do a video that takes the computer modeling and it shows how traffic moves through both of these. And so you can see buses going through, you can see cars going through, you can see everything going in different directions. So that is available for anybody that wants to see it on our website.
Addition to the website, what kind of trees and where are they going to be planted? That would help make people happier because a lot of people are not happy about the tree loss, especially mature trees. So at least knowing what we're gonna get, when we're gonna get them, how big they're gonna be. And you might reconsider more than a 1-year trial, whether they live or die. We put more onus on Sound Transit for all the trees that they had to replace at 2 years. Why is Shoreline only talking 1? And let me finish, then you can answer all these questions. Where the existing 148th station is, there was originally a park and ride lot surrounded by mature Doug firs and pines. Sound Transit was very sensitive in the need to take those down and that they had on call an environmental wildlife guy who helped with bird rescue. Sound Transit has done mitigation at Ronald Bog. They have been extremely sensitive based on the requirements forced on them by the city of Shoreline. Why is the city of Shoreline not being sensitive to the very needs of citizens, wildlife, trees that they require of all the builders, all the developers, and Sound Transit here in Shoreline? I think we need to step up.
Did you want an answer to that, or was that a comment? Because I don't disagree with some of your comment.
So just both, but,
Why are you not being accountable?
well, you can be more accountable just by putting more information out for the public so that we know what it is you're doing, not assuming that we know what you're doing. Also just a referral that you might get a hold of Sound Transit, or Juniper might know who the wildlife guy was that helped out with
Right.
the park and ride lot that Sound Transit used, so that we have somebody on call and available when you run up against nesting birds, rather than just cutting down the tree and calling it good.
Yeah, that is something we've heard within the last few days, and something we're definitely
Okay,
investigating.
thanks, Trish.
I'll also answer the first question you had, which is about the establishment periods of the trees. I had said that there was a 1 year ownership by the contractor. There is also 2 years following that the city pays for the contractor to go out and maintain the trees, water them, and replace dead ones. So we do have 3 years. It's just 1 year by the contractor to kind of their craftsman promise on the trees, and then we have 2 years after that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anything that hasn't been answered? Okay.
It's to the wildlife. I mean, is there any way that you can implement this sooner rather than later, instead of 3 months down the road in June for the east side, do something while we're talking about April's removal of trees up here on the west side? Because it's a significant concern, and it's been voiced here many times over. And there seems to be resources that have been aligned with projects that Sound Transit has done, so they're readily available to reach out to, and I would assume that wouldn't take long.
Yeah, we can certainly reach out and we can certainly investigate that. It's just we're also in a position where the contractor has been authorized to begin this work. And like we said, this is a long duration project and they have a lot of work to do. So what we don't want to do is stop the contractor because that delays the project and it will end up costing us more. And so, but all the trees will not come down on day one. Certainly if they start taking down trees tomorrow, they will not all be down by Friday. So
Right.
we can
So can we
certainly.
work on a
We
solution
will
to doing
look at
this?
we can look at some alternatives. We can see what's available. I don't know that somebody can, jump to it in, 30 seconds. So we'll just have to see what
Well,
readily.
how about,
what
like
readily available
the
means.
timeframe of a few days or a week, or just giving
So we can- yeah.
it a priority.
Yeah, we'll look into it. Absolutely.
Just to follow up on that, I'm actually good friends with one of the best wildlife first responders in the area, and I spoke with her after speaking to Pause, who told me that probably the first day will be the most traumatic day for wildlife, as the noise will be a surprise to them. It's baby squirrel season right now, and a number of birds nesting right now. She's willing, and a number of people are willing to support her in helping with the wildlife right away. So, and I sent her name and her information to the city already.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else online?
I think everybody's questions online have been answered.
Thank you. This has been recorded and it will be up on the city website in the next few days. So if there are people who missed it.
Just quick question, how many people online, and I think the people online would like to know how many people were here in person, just so we have an idea of attendance overall.
At the peak, we had about 32 people online, or 32 people logged in online, and how many people are here? Let me see. And 17 in the council chambers for the people online.
Hey, Thank you all for your questions and input, and we will be doing updates regularly, so watch for more of those.